Okay, so we're on page 229, module 6.10, and we are talking about bones. And last time we began the chapter and we just talked about general functions of bones. So what do you remember are some of the general functions of bones?
Support, storage.
Support, okay, storage of what?
Calcium.
It's like calcium, lipids, and there's a few other minerals.
Produces red blood cells.
Yep, it produces red blood cells, a very important function. Protection of your other organs. Helps in leverage. I think it's one of the things it said also. Let's look at the different mineral content, which we talk about. Calcium being probably the main one we deal with when we talk about storage. But look, phosphate also is a very important molecule that's stored in bone. I think the battery's going dead in my remote. I think it has gone dead. Okay. Oh, maybe I have to do this. Okay. Importance of calcium. So why do you even need calcium? It is the most abundant mineral in the body. 99% is deposited in your skeleton. Calcium is going to be important for so many reasons, which you're going to see as we go forward in the class, like when we talk about the muscles and how the nervous system works. It's also important for blood coagulation. And actually a big part of your bone structure and keeping it strong. But even if you change just a little bit of the variation, it can affect how your neurons and muscles work. We'll talk about some of those disorders also. Normal daily fluctuations are less than 10%, so you shouldn't see much more than that when it comes to the amount of calcium. So how do we maintain those calcium levels? Well, the intestines, they absorb calcium and phosphate, but it's hormones that regulate that. Your bones themselves, remember last time we talked about osteoclasts? If you need more calcium to be released, then the osteoclasts break down your bone and release calcium. If you need to build more calcium or store it, the osteoblast will take calcium up and deposit it in new matrix. Your kidneys also regulate the amount of calcium and phosphate by how much it releases in your urine or it reabsorbs. So this graphic takes all those into account as far as mechanisms of calcium maintenance. Okay, let's talk about some specific hormones involved in calcium maintenance. Parathyroid hormone, and we'll talk more about this when you get to 169. You go to the endocrine system and deal with it a lot, and then other systems as well. But parathyroid hormone is secreted by the parathyroid gland, and the parathyroid glands are like these little four areas right behind the thyroid gland. You can't see it here. These are the thyroid gland, but you'd have to actually take the thyroid gland off and look behind it to see the parathyroid. So what happens is in your bones, osteoclasts are stimulated when PTH is released, and it starts eroding the matrix, and therefore it releases calcium into your bloodstream. So that's parathyroid hormone. Okay, also, parathyroid hormone has an effect on your intestines and your kidneys. In your intestines, it causes calcitriol to have a stimulatory effect where it enhances, and the calcium absorption will increase in that case. And again, in this case, it enhances, parathyroid hormone enhances the effects of calcitriol in your intestines, which causes more calcium absorption to occur. In your kidneys, parathyroid hormone is going to cause an increased release of calcitriol and stimulate calcium reabsorption in your kidneys. So parathyroid hormone, again, is very important in calcium regulation. Okay, so it is going to increase the amount of calcium in the bloodstream. So you're going to increase calcium in the bloodstream, and that's what's shown here in this graphic. Okay, now also though, sometimes we want the opposite, and that is to decrease your blood calcium. So now the other hormone involved is calcitonin. So calcitonin is secreted by the C cells in the thyroid gland. And parathyroid hormone is released by parathyroid gland, right? Calcitonin is released by thyroid gland. And the response in your bones is osteoclast activity is inhibited. Your calcium is deposited in the bone matrix. So we're taking calcium out of the bloodstream. In your intestines, calcium absorption is decreased, and you get decrease in PTH and calcitriol. And in your kidneys, it inhibits calcitriol release and calcium reabsorption. So the totally opposite effect of parathyroid hormone. Okay, so keep in mind that calcium regulation is going to be involved with bones, intestines, kidneys as far as regulation. Got it? Okay. And again, this chart summarizes what we just talked about. Factors that decrease your blood calcium levels. In the other case, they increase it. So what was the hormone that will increase calcium in your bloodstream? Parathyroid hormone. Which one decreases it? Calcitonin. Okay. And it does so through what three systems or organs? Bones, kidneys, intestines. Very good. So those two charts are really good ones to look at, that one and that one. So parathyroid hormone is going to increase calcium in blood, and calcitonin is going to decrease blood calcium levels in the blood. I hope that's what I just did. Okay. As your calcium reserves, the skeleton is the primary role in homeostasis of calcium. It has a direct effect on the shape and strength of your bones. So release of calcium into the blood is going to weaken your bones because it's taking calcium away from your bones. And deposition of calcium salts strengthens your bones. So keep in mind, if we increase calcium in the blood, that means that's less calcium in the bones. Okay. If we decrease calcium from the blood, there's more calcium in the bones. Let's talk about what happens sometimes with bones. Of course, you can break or fracture them. So fracture is a crack or break because of mechanical stress. And most of them do heal just fine, especially in younger people, because you have a good blood supply in your bones, as we've mentioned. And you have good cellular activity in the periosteum and endosteum. Periosteum is that outer connective tissue layer of bones. The endosteum is the connective tissue layer in the medullary cavity. And there's 4 steps when it comes to repair. First of all, fracture hematoma. So a large clot will close the injured vessel in the bone. This occurs just within a few hours. It begins in a few hours. Next, callus formation occurs. You have an internal callus. You have a network of spongy bone where you have the inner edges of the fracture uniting. And remember, when you look in that medullary cavity, that inner surface is spongy bone. Again, the majority of that diaphysis is compact bone, but right on the interior is this layer of spongy bone. And then you form an external callus composed of cartilage and bone that stabilizes the outer edge of the fracture. So this shows that cartilage of external callus in the picture. This shows the internal callus. Next, spongy bone formation occurs. The cartilage of the external callus is replaced by spongy bone. The bone fragments and dead bone are removed and replaced. And then the ends of the fracture are held together tightly. And then finally, compact bone formation. Spongy bone gets replaced by the compact bone. And you get remodeling over time that will get rid of a lot of evidence of the fracture. Not always totally. So remember those 4 stages. Let's look at them one more time. Fracture hematoma, callus formation, spongy bone formation, compact bone formation. Repair of a fracture. Okay, let's talk about different types of fractures. A closed or simple fracture, that means it's totally internal, so you don't see a break in the skin when this happens. And you could only see this in an X-ray. If it's open or compound, then it projects through the skin. And for obvious reasons, it's going to be dangerous because infection can get in and you could have uncontrolled bleeding. Again, remember, plenty of blood vessels in bone. Okay, transverse fracture. Break shaft, when you break the shaft across a long axis, as you can see in this picture. And then a spiral fracture produced when you have twisting of the bones. And it's spread along the length of the bone. Stress fracture. Spiral fracture, which is also, you'll hear people call it a stress fracture. Okay, displaced fractures, you produce new and abnormal bone. In non-displaced fractures, you retain the normal alignment. And in compression fractures, this occurs in your vertebrae. When you have extreme stress, it's pushing down. And this happens often with people that have osteoporosis, where the bone tissue is breaking down. Okay, green stick fractures. One side of the shaft is broken, one side is bent. Often happens in children. And one reason why is because the long bones have not ossified, they haven't hardened. And then you have something called a comminuted fracture. It's actually shattered with fragments. Epiphyseal fractures, they occur where the bone matrix is calcifying at your epiphysis on the ends of the long bone. If it's a clean transverse fracture, then it heals just fine. However, if it's not monitored, these breaks at the epiphyseal plate and the cartilage, they could have extreme or dire consequences in terms of growth of the person, the young person. Because remember, that's where growth occurs, lengthening of the bones at the epiphysis. By the way, some people say epiphysis, so don't be surprised if you hear that. It's different. Okay, Pott's fracture occurs at the ankle and affects both the medial malleolus and the lateral malleolus. And then Cole's fracture is a break in the distal radius. Which bone is the radius?
The radial thumb
The
side.
thumb side. Okay. And distal means?
Away from the connection.
Yeah, the furthest from the attachment. Okay. Actually done with 6.